Interesting question that we began to talk about yesterday. The question is the obligation, if any, to be mehabed a parent after they're gone. Now, from an emotional point of view, we know what we're going to do. We're going to do everything we can to honor them, clearly. The question is, from a halachic point of view, is there a doraita obligation, yes or no, falling under kabed tavicha vetimecha? Kabed tavicha vetimecha is a biblical obligation. So does that biblical obligation extend to after the parent is gone? And if so, how? What would be the expression of it? We know when the parent is alive, it's about food and shelter and basic care and transportation, like we've talked about. But now, the parent is no longer here. So first question is there an obligation? The second question is, if there is an obligation, is it biblical or moral or maybe rabbinic? And the third question is, if there is one of the above, well, then how do we do it? You know, again, it's fine to say that we're going to do things from an emotional point of view to fundamentally respect them. So we started on this road yesterday. I want to go back at it and narrow it down. I'm going to read again the language of Maran, because his language here, I think, his language is always brilliant, but I think in this case it's exceptionally careful for good reason. It says as follows: Hayav adam nechabed et aviv ve'imo gam achar motam, achrei motam. A person has to honor his parent with the word kaved. Remember, we learned kaved and mora. Kaved is the weightiness of the person that demands the very specific practical care. And the mora is being in awe. He says there is a commandment, an obligation, and it's from the kaved perspective, right? Then he continues, Yesh omim de'en chiyuv ze'ela midrabanan. But there are those who say that the chiyuv, the obligation, is only rabbinic. We're going to talk about it. We had some great back and forth on that yesterday. We're going to develop it further. V'yesh chokim v'omrim shagam nachar mita chiyuv kibud av va'em hu min haTorah. There are those who disagree and say that the chiyuv, the obligation after the person is gone, is still biblical. In other words, there's an absolute expression of it after the person is gone. V'chen ikad. And Maran holds that's the ikad. That's the truth. That's where we go. And then he says as follows: V'ikar hakavod hu lachar mita l'romem kevod aviv. You know, you just mentioned the Conway pieces that we're doing. It's so timely. He says because the primary expression of kavod after a parent is gone, I want to spend a few minutes on this, is l'romem kavod aviv ve'imo. Romem is to raise, but the term l'romem is more than to raise, it's to glorify, it's to put in lights, so to speak. Okay? So let's flesh out some examples of that. But first of all, he says, he holds it is doraita, it is biblical, number one. No, he holds this both, but he holds that the opinion that says it's been midoraita is the ikad, is the primary opinion. We're going to flesh it out more, but that's what he says. And how do you do it? L'romem et kibodam. So what would be some examples of that? To heighten the respect that's attributed to them.
Maybe donate something in their name. So then, you know, their name.
Beautiful. Donating something in their name. Excellent. What else?
Classes in their honor.
Classes in their honor.
In their honor.
Kaddish. Classes in their honor. What about telling my kids over and over, this is what mom taught us. This is what daddy used to do.
Or, you know, yeah, sure. Yeah. Or maintaining the traditions of your parents,
right?
Continuing, right?
Right, beautiful, and just as core as maintaining it, yeah. Right? Beautiful. So far he's holding that kavod is mideoraita, which, by the way, is a little bit of a stretch. The kavod after the person's gone is midoraita. And he says that there are specific ways to express it. And he's giving a beautiful angle, which really resonates back to when the person's alive as well. That omem et kivodo, to raise his kavod. Now, let's go back a few steps to where we were last week and so on. We never really spoke about being meromem et kavod avi or imi, meaning when the person was alive, we didn't talk about heightening the respect that people give them. We didn't say that a primary part of our responsibility in terms of honoring a parent is to heighten the respect that's given to them. We never said that. We didn't see that anywhere. If that's true when the person is gone, shouldn't it be true when the person's alive? Alachad kama v'kama. Of course it is. Right? Of course it's true when the person's alive. So now the question would become, what does it mean when the person's alive? Now, yes, putting their name on something that we care about, on an institution and so on, beautiful, yes. What else would it mean? The romem et kivodam, when they're still alive. This is a different level. I think this is a different level, right? It's not the basic needs that we talked about. It's not causing them pain that we talked about, right? The romem et kivodam means I'm not only obligated to respect them, I'm obligated to increase the respect that they receive. It's fabulous. I think it's a bit of a bombshell, honestly, because if we're taking every word seriously, which we always do, of course, then what do you want me to do? He says, "Kegon nikroto Abba Mari," to say my esteemed father, my great father, when referencing him. By the way, that's a very beautiful thing, right? We say that about a great rabbi.
Yeah, I was gonna say it feels like godly.
It feels like godly.
Like right, like
right.
the way you talk about,
Yeah.
how great people.
Yeah, and doesn't that make sense? I mean, right, to those of us who don't have our parents anymore, right? Don't we feel those kind of things? Don't we? Right? The level we miss them, so now, and my parents are gone a long time. My father's gone 17 years. My mother's gone 15 years. I probably think about them more as time goes on. I find myself referencing my father's approach, speaking it out to my children and others, thinking about the particularly special relationship I had with my mother. It's funny. I was really a mama's boy. No, mama's boy like you never saw. I got married. We moved back into my parents' house. I couldn't remove the tether from my mother. No, I really could. Right? You did that too?
So did AB.
So did
We
AB?
lived there at the same time.
What? Stop it.
I'm in one room with my wife. Me and AB got married a couple of months apart. AB is next door in his room with his wife. We lived there for a year.
Stop it. Isn't that great?
And we were in heaven.
We're in heaven.
You figure you want to get married, No, we were in heaven.
That's awesome. That's the best story yet.
I could say now you did it too. My wife goes, nobody does this.
Yeah. My wife still nags me about it. And we had a dog, Candy, who used to get in the bed every night, sleep at the end of the bed. This is great. But, right? Who wanted to leave? Okay, you loved your wife. Yeah, okay, I love my wife. But to leave my mother? For what reason? Right? That's the best. So, he mentions other things. Lasot lo nachat ruach la'achad ptirato. Another beautiful use of words. To bring them comfort after their death.
I think this is a huge, huge line. Mm-hmm. I tell you, you lose your parents, you feel like you lost them alone, right? And this is, to me, like you're still connected forever. Because you can still give them respect and still give them feeling and stuff. So they're here.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Right? And I think that could help somebody who's in pain they're not physically here, but
that's awesome.
Right? You're still connected.
That's awesome.
Right? I think.
We never think of it that way. Because we've said that while the parent is alive, the way we're learning these halachot, The primary beneficiary of the person respecting his parents is the person doing the respecting, right? The child. To your point, and you're right. Why is it any different after they're gone? The primary beneficiary of the person doing a mitzvah is the person doing it. So the person expressing that respect for a parent after he or she's gone is getting the primary benefit of that action. It's great.
Yeah.
Great. Game changer.
Right, and the fact that, they're saying it's still, it's still a real thing, right? You have to lift them up and highlight them and check.
Yeah.
Right, the fact that it's more than your feeling, they're saying that's
Real
what you have to
terms,
do. Right.
practical terms.
Yeah.
You mentioned yesterday that the fact that it's the oraita, right, is for me, right? You said that the beneficiary of the person doing it is the doer, right? Like all mitzvot, right? And therefore you held that it's the oraita when they're alive and maybe not when they're gone, right? And I saw that thinking, now that we're more medayek in the language, on Joey's point, the truth of the matter is, go back the other way.
I agree. Yeah, I'm switching now also. And now I'm thinking that maybe there's a third category. Good morning, Isaac.
Hi, honey.
Maybe there's a third category in the spirit of law, which is to exalt them, to glorify them,
Right.
even when they're alive and when they're not alive.
To exalt, to glorify and exalt. That's what we're hearing here.
Yeah,
That's what we're hearing
there's a
here.
third in the spirit now.
So that's a very nice point. We didn't say this before. To glorify and exalt, we didn't say it before. But it's true. And why wouldn't it be true? We glorify and exalt a boss, a rabbi, right? Why wouldn't it be for a parent or a grandparent? And the truth, it should be.
Should be.
100% right. And by the way, in terms of family, one of the interesting things I've seen over the years, lo aleinu, is some young adults don't know who they are. I'm not using it in a cliched Western sense, in a very practical sense. In other words, people should know that if they are part of the Shilach family, these are our core immovable values. This is what a Shilach does. This is how we think. This is what we care about. And again, we're not talking about all the general stuff like honesty and integrity. Okay, everybody holds by that. But if you have the great good fortune of being part of this family, this is what we stand for. And that should be very overt to our children.
Spoke about this, I remember a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Like, go write it down.
Write it down, exactly. Hi, Mars. Good morning. So that comes back into the picture over here. Good. So now we're adding kavod. We're adding the term, Mars, to glorify. Come sit over here so I can see you. We're adding, you want for your, we're adding the term to glorify. To glorify is part of the mitzvah. Excellent. Okay. Hadakat nen neshama arichat azkara biyom hashana. Right, to have he mentions here an annual sort of event, an annual class, which is not Al Minhag, but it's a beautiful idea. Aliyah la Torah biyom hashana. They're going up, and the Yortzeit going up and saying some Hajjafri. And V'chayot Sebo. Okay. So now what we're holding is as follows. We're holding that based on our first reading, Cham Yom Tov, based on our first reading, of Maran, right? Based on our first reading, we're holding that. Even though there's a back and forth with the rabbis on whether Kibud Av or Em, after the person passes away, is the Rabbanan or the Oraita or the Rabbanan, he's holding so far that it is biblical. And because it's biblical, i.e. it's absolutely mandated, black and white, not to talk about, he's saying, well, what do you want me to do with that? I don't know how to express it. And he's saying the way to express it, and it's a term that we're going to coin now in our learning, is to glorify the person, is to do things, whether it be sharing the person's core values with our children, with our friends in our business and community relationships, or doing class every year for them, whatever it might be. But it's an overt, specific, deliberate action L'romem et kivodam, to heighten the respect that was felt for them when they were alive, which would mean that whenever we could talk about a parent, we do.
Like perpetuate their name.
Perpetuate their name and glorify it more. Glorify it more. Right? Now, I'm speaking to myself now, right? I'm calling myself out on something and saying, whenever you can talk about your mother or father, do it. It may be a doraita, biblical commandment. If it's not a biblical commandment, it's rabbinic. It's enough. It's good enough too. It's enough of a demand. And so now let's go one step back to Isaac's point from yesterday. If the obligation is to be mehabed after the person's gone, and we're going to say that there's a machloket, whether it's the Rabbanan, it's the Oraita, but we're leading to the fact that it's the Oraita, it's biblical. What is the benefit to the person doing it? We mentioned a minute ago that the benefit to the people hearing it is to understand better who they are, right? The family values. What's the benefit to the person doing it, right? The purpose of a mitzvah is for the mitzvah doer to become better. So what's the value in this case?
So if that's what it is, to glorify their name, then what would ever come out to be the difference if it's biblical or rabbinic?
Excellent.
I don't know. When would it conflict?
Fabulous, Jeffrey. Fabulous. Hold that for a little bit. Hold it. Fabulous. Good. What's the upshot to the person doing it? Morris. What is the upshot to the person doing it? How do they become a better person?
It's a continuation of why you should, the reasons for you to do Kivod Avim while they're alive.
It's a continuation of the reason you're doing while they're alive. It doesn't change.
To build your character.
To build my own character. Right. So that to the extent that I call out and I shout out the core positives of mom and dad, I'm going to become better.
What, dude? Because
Period. Whether they're here or not.
Because then you expect yourself to meet that standard.
I expect myself to be that standard. Yeah.
Again, if parents and Hashem are the co-creators, I would assume the point of Kibbutz Avim is to glorify Hashem, and inevitably, when they're gone, all the more so. If I can't see them, they're not physically here.
Excellent. So the point of if we glorify our co-creators, both God and our parents, what's the question? What's the question, right? I glorify God forever and ever. Excellent. Okay. Let's go back at some of the sources that we looked at quickly, and then we're going to add to them. Okay. Gemara Masechet Kiddushin. Tanu Rabbanan. Mechabdo b'hayav, mechabdo b'moto. Pashut. The rabbis say in Masechet Kiddushin that you mehabed the parent in their lifetime and afterwards, and they don't on the surface make a diuk between one level of the obligation and the other, i.e., they put them on the same line. Shulchan Aruch brings down Hayav Dekabdo Afilu Achar Moto, right? Shulchan Aruch now says it a little bit different. They say Hayav Dekabdo Afilu Achar Moto. So when he says it, that even after they're gone, it gives you the sense, right, from Shulchan Aruch, maybe it's not the same level. Afilu Achar Moto, even after they're gone, might suggest that it's not the same level. It doesn't say it's not, but it might suggest that it's not. The Zohar brings down. They're bringing on Parashat Bechukotai. B'var shehiyuv ki kavod achar mitah hu yoter ma'asher b'chayav. Chiyuv kavod achar mitah hu yoter ma'asher b'chayav. Jeffrey, what does that mean? According to the Zohar, it means what? Morris? According to the Zohar, it means what? It's greater. The Zohar says, you're asking me a question of whether it's the Oraita or the Rabbanan after the person is gone. He comes out and says that it's greater after the person is gone, not less. Now, if you go back to Isaac's point of yesterday, which is the purpose of the mitzvah is to make me better, then there might be a greater effort that has to be made after the person's gone because it's purely emotional, it's purely mental, and for that reason, I have to make more of an effort because it's all about me making myself a better person. So the obligation, according to the Zohar, is greater after it's gone.
but the person you can't get any benefit from the
Excellent.
If you give
Well, like
someone
a
kavod, he's going to want to return it in some way.
Excellent. Jeffrey's making another point, fantastic point. He's saying like this. When a person is alive, when the parent is alive, if you give them kavod, you could also get a benefit from it, right? There's nothing wrong with that,
But sometimes,
but you could also get a benefit from it, right? But by showing respect to a parent, you could also get a benefit. Over here, after the person's gone, they can't give you something back for the kavod you show them. So in that respect, it's a greater action. Beautifully said, yeah.
Just going back to the previous lessons that we learned about lying. So let's say, God forbid, we have a parent that is not as great as we would want them to be. Do we now have an obligation to lie or exalt them to our children and say stories?
We didn't say that. No, we didn't say that, but
Oh,
we
I know
have
we
it.
didn't.
No, I know, but it's a very important point. We have the obligation to identify the good stuff and build the good stuff and glorify the good stuff.
Okay.
We don't have an obligation to lie, and it's a very important question that you're raising. We don't, but we do have an obligation to identify the good stuff. And we might have an obligation to go beyond the bad stuff to what the source of the bad stuff might have been, and to present that for what it really was.
Got it.
Right? We know that very often the bad stuff comes from a place of pain, a place of confusion, huh?
Hurt people, hurt people.
Hurt people, hurt people. Right. Very good. Okay. Okay, so the Zohar says that Huyuv kavod hamita hu yoter masher b'hayav shamnu sham. Achar shemet im tomar shepator mekavod eno ked. Ki af al pi shehu met od mechuyav b'kavod od yoter. So the Zohar says that after the person's gone, there's a greater obligation to respect him. Shekatuv, kabedat imecha, avicha, I'm sorry. V'imoto haben, holech b'derech hayashar. ומתקן מעשיו, ודאי שזה מכבד את אביו. מכבד אותו בעולם הזה, בין אנשים, מכבדו בעולם הבא, אצל הקדוש ברוך הוא. The Zohar is saying it from a very interesting perspective. Saying a very interesting perspective. He said, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm paraphrasing, right? I don't know what you're talking about. Of course, the obligation is greater after the person dies. You know why? Because you have to constantly be making yourself a better person. And to the extent that you make yourself a better person, that reflects greatly on your parent who's in the Shamayim, and that will elevate his neshama. So I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you have to do more after the person is gone. Because now, when were the stakes greater? They were never greater than now. To elevate the person's neshama was never greater than now. I have an opportunity, an obligation like I never had before. So he says, common sense, I want to do more now. You hearing it? Moshe, no, you with me?
Yes, but it's still it's like a limited in scope how you can respect them after they pass away.
No, and this, according to the Zohar, it's not. According to the Zohar, what the Zohar is saying, every time you do something good, every time you work harder in your learning Torah, every time you become a bigger Ba'al Chesed, every time you do that effectively, what you're doing is you're celebrating where you came from. And
He means it's not
whatever,
physical
it's the
favors.
same way, like, huh?
He means it's not physical favors for the person. It's all spiritual. That's what he means.
That's right, it's all spiritual. So it's even bigger.
Does that mean
If my actions now can raise the place that my mother and father are in Gan Eden, is there anything bigger than that? That's the Zohar's perspective, yeah.
it seems like the foundation for all mitzvot is kivud avayim then? Because if I'm doing a mitzvah, I'm exalting my parents and then raising
Yes,
them up.
that's a beautiful way to say it, and I would completely agree.
What if, God forbid, whatever, they kick you out of the house, they don't want you to be
Very good.
with
We're going
us.
to talk about that. Next week, we're going to talk about a parent who's a Rasha. It's a different story.
Not even a Rasha, just they're not.
Well, they kick him out of the house because he's a drug addict.
Okay. That's what I'm saying. We're gonna talk about the relationships that didn't work. We're going to talk about the problematic relationships. After we have a couple more steps to set our firm foundation. We're just about there, and then we're going to talk about those, other kinds of cases, which God willing are limited. But do we understand the premise here?
Rabbi, I forgot how we settled the issue of like the core of the mitzvah being the Gemara, like listing the shelter, right? And then that kind of falls out.
Right.
So there's like a.
That's right. We said the core mitzvah is, as we paraphrase, the creature comforts. But what we did is we got behind it and we said, well, what's behind providing the creature comforts? Respect, care for their needs. Oh, well, how far do I have to go with that? That became questionable, right? How far do I have to go to preclude the tza'ad of a parent? Because the truth of the matter is the reason that I provide the food to my father or the shelter to my mother or take them back and forth or whatever those things were is because not doing so would make them, would hurt them, would make them unhappy, would frighten them, would confuse them, right? So the top line is it still bubbles up to an emotional need, right? It's not the practical need per se, it's the practical need that will end up in an emotional place because to your point, if it was only the practical need, we don't need any of this. But because we're going to say that it's the practical need that comes from something, where does every practical need come from, right? Again, if you're going to say, as some of the sources did, right, Morris, to your point, if you're going to say, no, it's practical, period, any tza'ad, anything outside of the practical, anything that's in the emotional, has nothing to do with this conversation, don't take me there. And there were plenty of opinions, we noted a number of them who said that. It's black and white, it's practical. Tza'ad has nothing to do with this. We ended up in a place where we said, we're going to be sensitive to sa'ad, to the pain, or in this case, the opposite that would bring to the parent, because of either lifnim mishat hadin or midat chasidut. We want to go beyond the letter of the law, or we want to be saintly in this respect. But if you remember, Sefer HaCharedim and others came back and said, it's not true. The basis of the creature comforts that we're obligated to give is the emotional. And therefore, from the core biblical obligation of kabed, you have to fulfill those. And now, to your point though, we're going one step further. The person's not here. You can't talk to me about the creature comforts, and you can't talk to me about the emotional benefit. They're not getting either. Right? And therefore you could say, if it's an obligation altogether, some people say it's not an obligation at all. I mean, of course, a person would never disrespect his parents even after they're gone. But some authorities say that there is no obligation to respect the parent.
It's all over the place.
Huh?
It's all over the place.
After they're gone. It's all over the place. That's correct.
Saying it's not obligation at all.
That's right. Welcome to the halachic discourse. Welcome. We're going to end up where we're going to end up, okay? But so far, I want you to understand all the pillars here, and I want you to seriously consider the Zohar HaKadosh's opinion, which I think is extremely important to think about and maybe to own, which is that a parent's perot, the fruit of a parent's labor, so to speak, are his and her children. So every time a child does something meaningful and positive, they elevate. Every time the opposite, they degrade. Because I can't remove the tether. I'm tethered to that person forever and ever and ever and ever and ever beyond time. And that never goes away. And that's the Zohar's position. The Zohar's position is, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm paraphrasing. I don't know what the question is. What are you even questioning? We know that the parent and the child are forever connected. We know that whatever the child does directly impacts the standing of the parent because it's a direct offshoot of the parent. So therefore, he says, of course, thank you, honey.
Yes, like I've heard it said that not a person gets judged after 120 years, but then at the end of time they get judged again.
Excellent.
To see what all the descendants end up doing.
Phenomenal, Jeffrey. Say it again. Say it again.
A person gets judged not only after 120 for what he's accomplished at that point, but then again at the end of time after all the results of all that his actions do throughout his descendants.
Wouldn't that make sense? It would make sense. Okay, very good. So let's see. Beautiful. מכבד אותו בעולם הזה בין אנשים, ומכבדו בעולם הבא אצל הקדוש ברוך הוא, והקדוש ברוך הוא מנחם עליו, ומושיבו בכיסא כבודו. He said a fantastic thing. He says that the person who honors, the Zohar says, that the person who honors a parent after they're gone, yeah, he's elevating the parent in front of people, and raising the person in front of people, raising his noteworthiness, and elevating him in front of God, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will raise him. And again, it makes total sense. It makes total sense. Does a teacher get a rippling effect of good of the student he taught, and the student goes and does something good? Of course he does. Pashut, right?
The whole point of Kaddish, doesn't that reflect on this?
Yeah. So
Elevate,
it's elevating.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Kaddish is a public proclamation, right, of my values and my love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the context of my father, and therefore every time I say it, it will elevate him.
And beyond, for most people, it changes them forever. Right?
How's that? That's nice. How's that?
People that, let's say, have never gone to shul, all of a sudden you see Kaddish for respect drew them to come to shul. Now they start coming for the rest of their lives, and it brings them, and they start to learn from it, and then and it
nice.
So
Nice.
that happens
It's true.
a lot.
That happens a lot.
Kavod is the.
It really does happen a lot. What's that? What is that?
Meaning kavod is that whole process is built off of kavod. That's the reason the guy walked in the door.
Nice. Right. It all comes from Kavod. Beautiful. Love that. Beautiful. Okay. Ramban adds, המכבד את ילדיו במותן משובח ממי במותן, משובח ממי שמכבדו בחייהם, שמכבדו בחייהם אינו אלא משום יראה, שם ירושה. This is something that Jeffrey was referencing a few minutes ago. מכבדו במיתתם אינו מכבדו אלא לשם שמיים. He says like this, the person who gives kavod to his children during his lifetime, or receives kavod from his children during his lifetime, there's a little bit of an ulterior motive there, right? There's a benefit. The father's going to help me. I'm anticipating an ultimate reward in terms of my Yerusha, in terms of my inheritance. But over here, there is nothing. Right? Now, you can't fully say that because we say that the father would be, or the parent who's gone would be melitz tov, b'shamayim. Right?
What?
A melitz tov, meaning the parent who's gone would be an advocate on behalf of the person remaining
Okay,
alive.
it's spiritual and it requires faith. It
Yeah,
requires,
yes, good. The other is much more black and white. Right, there, excellent. Okay, let's go a little bit further. We had the case, okay, so now we're that much more clear and robust in terms of our overall understanding. We had the case where, I'm going to read the case again. Interesting case that the Gemara brings down. Okay. He brings another case from Masechet Kiddushin. Rabbi Asi, the Nafik me'eretz Yisrael ekrat imo. Started to talk about this yesterday. Rabbi Asi leaves Eretz Yisrael, where he's on his way out of Eretz Yisrael, to greet his mother. Ubsov shama shemeta bederech. And then he hears that she passed away en route. V'amar, iyadi la nafke. L'chora mashmad kibud avim lachar mita'eno min haTorah. He says, he turns to the crowd, and he says, if I knew she passed, I wouldn't have left Israel. If I knew she passed,
You could honor her a different way.
I wouldn't have left Israel. Okay, so
At this
let's see
point.
what we're going to do with that. Very good. שאם היה חייב לכבדה, איך אמר שאם היה יודע שמתה אמו לא היה יוצא עליה, אלא שבשיטה לא נודעת למי שם כתב, ואף אגב דאמרינא מכבדו בחייו מכבדו במותו, שאני אחד איכא איסורא דנפיק מארץ ישראל. Says like this, if the obligation is to honor her, midoraita, the biblical obligation is to honor her during her life and after her life, what's the difference if she passed away? Right? He says to his students, had I known she passed away, I wouldn't have left the country. But 1 second. If the obligation is the same, what's the difference? Why would you have not left the country?
But that's not what she needs as much now.
Huh?
Before she needed that more. Now she doesn't need that much if she has other people to take care of her. And everything.
Okay, but from
So,
the
she doesn't really need that right now.
very good. But from the perspective of kibud, of honoring, if the obligation is the same, why would he say anything like that? It's suggested based on this that the obligation is different. You shouldn't leave the land of Israel, right? But if I'm leaving the land of Israel for a biblical commandment, then it's all good.
But we just said when a person's gone, the way to give them kavod is to make her name greater.
Right.
It's not going to make her name greater
Good.
to go there. It's a different way of performing the mitzvah now.
Very good. So you're saying it does. I love where you are. You're saying this story doesn't necessarily tell me that it's not a deoraita, that it's not a biblical commandment. It tells me that the way to fulfill the biblical commandment after death is different than going to greet her. It's a beautiful approach to the story. Beautiful. Let's see. משמע שהבין דאין החינמי יש חיוב מן התורה לכבדה גם אחר מיתה ורק משום איסור יציאה לחוץ לארץ אמר דידע לא היה יוצא אלא שכבר עמדו על דבריו דלמה רק אחר ששמע שמתה אמו אמר כן והרי גם אם הייתה אמו בחיים היה אסור לצאת לחוץ לארץ. He says like this, he says, why should the rabbi have made the statement after she died? If he had to leave in any case. And if he didn't have to leave, even to be Machabed, his mother, while she was alive, then he never had to leave. So why is he making this comment? I had to leave when she was alive, now I no longer have to leave. He's suggesting with his comment that there was a change in the status. Let's see.
That doesn't fit with what I said.
I'm not sure. It might. Hold another minute. I'm not sure. B'shut Me'en Chaim Katab di Yashiv. The Me'en Chaim writes something that will reconcile this. The kavod aviv ve'imam b'chayim haya deoraita have deoraita al kach haya yotzei l'chutz haaretz b'shvilam. לא היה חושש ליסוד דרבנן לצאת מארץ ישראל לחוץ לארץ. אבל כבוד דרחם איתה הוא מדרבנן, ולכן משום יצירת דרבנן, אמאי ידעה לא נפקה. He says the Me'en Chaim says like this. He takes from this that we have an Isur D'Rabbanan, a rabbinic prohibition to leave the land of Israel, right? So he says, if she was alive, we have a biblical obligation to respect her and a rabbinic obligation not to leave the land. The biblical obligation to respect my mother oversees. The rabbinic obligation overwhelms the rabbinic obligation not to leave the land. Therefore, when she was alive, there's no question that he had to leave the land and violate a rabbinic prohibition to fulfill the biblical imperative. But after she's gone, the Biaseh probably held that both of them were rabbinic. So I have a rabbinic versus a rabbinic, maybe I don't do it. And that's why, according to this opinion, he said that. Let's see, we have more. But Omnam, B'Tosafot Ri Zaken, Chidushei HaMaharsha, B'nei Yehoshua, and so on. Hikshu Maham Mechabdo B'Hayav Moto. Okay, let's see. Okay. אלא שיש שותחות לספיר ידי דאבה מדרבנן, ואפילו המקשים פחות מדרבנן, הווה לצאת. He says the reasoning of the Me'en Chaim doesn't work anyway. He says, even if I'm going to say that the rabbi reasoned that after she was gone, he only had a rabbinic obligation to be mechaber her, he still has a rabbinic obligation to be mechaber her. And if I have a rabbinic obligation to honor her after she's gone, and a rabbinic obligation not to leave the land, who says honoring her doesn't come before leaving the land?
There's negative. Negative always comes before, no?
Okay, you might say that the negative comes before, but what about the negative of not honoring her? By not doing it, there's a negative of not honoring her, right? So the reason to the reasoning to say that he didn't leave because he felt that they were both rabbinic doesn't play. And because you might still say that even though they're both rabbinic, you still have to leave.
He
A
doesn't
rabbinic
violate
versus a
not
rabbinic.
honoring- He doesn't have to violate not honoring her because he can honor her a different way. He doesn't necessarily have to be
But
violating not honoring her.
very nice. But this would hold that not going out to take care of her after she died was violating the obligation to honor her.
That's a dishonor.
That's a dishonor. And even if it's a rabbinic dishonor versus a rabbinic no, you have to go with the positive. That's where.
If that's a dishonor, no, then he has
If
to
that's
go.
a dishonor, very good, very nice. So Jeffrey's moving into another point, saying, no. I'm going to paraphrase, saying, no. The reason why we're circling back and saying Rabbi Yaseh did not mean that is not because he was implying that the obligation to honor a parent is rabbinic. That's not why. What Ham Yom Tov is saying is that not going to greet his mother after she passed was a dishonor. And therefore, you can't dishonor a parent, and therefore, he should have gone because not going was dishonoring her. And this doesn't help us in our argument of whether it's biblical or rabbinic. Very nice. Okay, let's do a little bit more. Interesting case. אביו ציווה לו לעשות איזה דבר לאחר מותו, ואמו האלמנה מצווה לו להפך. What do you want to do then? His father commanded him to do something before he passed away for one after he passed. His father told him, after I pass away, I want you to do X. Mother is still alive. She says, I don't want you to do it. Right? So if we're going to hold that they're both deoraitot, that they're both biblical, we have a problem, right? Because the command of the father before he died, even though he's gone, is still on the level of a biblical obligation. And the demand of the mother while she's alive, we know is biblical. So what do you want to do in that case? What do you say? If we say that the obligation to listen to the father after he's gone is now rabbinic, then the mother who's alive has a biblical imperative versus a rabbinic imperative. And of course, you have to listen to the mother. But what would you say? What would you say in this case? What would you do? Somebody comes to you and gives you this case. What do you want to do?
But there's no way out of it if that's the case.
If they're not dishonoring.
No way out of it is.
So he brings the Maharsha on this. He says an interesting thing. He says that even if you're going to say that the kabod attached to a parent after they die,
because he did it before when he was alive.
Very nice. You might say that. You might say that the
that.
command was made while the person was alive. That's one option.
That's
Very
why you have
nice.
to do it because it's biblical also.
Very, very nice. Beautiful, Jeffrey. Or he adds something interesting here. Listen to this, Rob. It's very interesting. He says that אם אביו ציווה לו לעשות עוד דבר לאחר מותו ואמו מצווה לו להפך, יניח כבוד אב יכבד כבוד אם. He should put aside the kavod of the father who's passed, and he should fulfill the kavod of the mother who told him to do something different. Listen to what he says here. לעולם כבוד החי עדיף מכבוד המת. ומכל מקום נראה שמודד לכיבוד אב לאחר מתה גם כן הווה מן התורה. ומדברי הנודע ביהודה, he brings another giant who said, משמע, שקצת תסביר עלי דגם לאחר מתה חיוב ומדאורייתא, דאי לאו הכי הווה לי למאמר שקרם כבוד אב ואם משום דהווה דאורייתא כבוד האם האב מדרבנן. He says like this. He says they're sort of holding on both sides. He says like this. The fact that the rabbis said if the father proclaimed something before he passed and asked somebody to fulfill something before he passed, and the mother who's still alive says to do something different, you should listen to the mother. That doesn't mean that the kabod hamet after death is not a deoraita. It is a deoraita. It's still a deoraita. It's still biblical. It doesn't downgrade after the person died. So if it doesn't downgrade after the person died, why do we listen to the wishes of the mother and not the dead father? What would you say?
Because the father would want you to listen to your mother.
Because the father would want you to listen to your mother. Right. That the kavod hachai is still going to be greater than the kavod hamet.
What do you mean he would want you to listen?
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting nuance that he's holding here. He says like this. If you're going to tell me on a black and white level, I'm going to tell you, the Maharsha brings down and...
What if it's where he wants to be buried?
Okay, one second. Step one, step. Okay, good. We'll go that in a second. Hang on a minute.
I mean, if Yaakov told Yosef, I want to be make, but he didn't make him swear, bury me over there in Israel, and let's say his mother was alive, said, no, I don't want to do that. Bury me. What?
Okay, very good. So let's go. Let's go. Let's give it. Very, very nice. So we're saying like this. If you're going to tell me on face value, we said, listen to the mother who's alive against the wishes of the father who asked you to do something but is now gone, right? Okay, very good. So you would hold that the living person's request is the oraita, it's biblical, and the deceased person's request is the rabbanan, because the living person's request is biblical, and the deceased person's request is the rabbanan. I have to listen to the mother. He says no. He brings a maharsha and someone else. He says no.
It doesn't say that because
Huh?
he was alive. It had nothing to do because he was alive when this whole thing took place.
So let's see.
Command took place.
No, okay, very nice. You might say you're going to hold that because he commanded it when he was alive, they're both deoraita, right? That's what Jeffrey's holding. Because he commanded it when he was alive, it doesn't fall into the category of respecting after he's gone, because they're both.
Does it matter who commands first?
Generally speaking, we listen to the father before the mother.
Generally speaking, listen to the father before the. Doesn't matter who made the command first.
No.
Okay.
Right, but in this case, and they have conflicting command. But in this case, he says like this: don't learn from this case that the kabod of the mit is any less than the kabod of the living. Don't learn that from this case, but learn from this case that the kabod level is the same. They're both midoraita, they're both biblical, but we always respect the living more than the dead. In other words, if it's a request like this, if it's a request to defame the memory of my father, of course I'm not going to do it. But if it's a request that says, where mom says, you know, son, I need you to take me to the doctor or something like that, and he would have gone to do something for the father who's deceased, he says that we respect the request of the living more than the need. We give it more weight because the person's living. It's more of an imperative. Yeah.
It depends on the actual case.
Or you might say it depends on the case. Because didn't you tell me a minute ago that the Zohar tells me that when I'm doing for the person who's gone, it has even greater positive because I'm raising the neshama? Huh? He would hold otherwise. Yeah. Sounds like it. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say what the qualifier is, as long as you're not disrespecting.
As long as you're not disrespecting, therefore what?
Therefore, you can listen to the mother. As long as you're not disrespecting the deceased.
As long as you're not disrespecting the deceased. So the question is by putting the deceased request behind the mother. In this case, black and white. The deceased said, do this. The mother's saying, don't do that. He's saying, don't use this to learn that the obligation to listen to the living parent is greater than it is to the non-living parent. It's not. It's the same, but we still have this little extra X, which means I have to give more respect to the person sitting right in front of me. Again, according to the Zohar, you'd say the opposite, but that's the position that we understand from the Maharsha, yeah.
So it is greater.
It is,
There's
but
more respect for the living.
it's greater.
Decline.
It's greater, but it's not. What? I respectfully decline.
Respectfully decline.
It's greater, but not, because he says that to the same level. They're both the Doraita, but on a practical level, I'm going to honor what the person standing in front of me is going to say. Okay, let's do another couple minutes.
Does this are things like how to bury them, where to bury them?
Jeffrey's question.
Separate?
Jeffrey's question. Say your question again about burying the person. You said you had a point about what was the point?
Yes, if a person's wish was to be buried in a certain place.
Let's say the person wants to be buried in Israel, right? The father wants to be
Is
buried.
that
And after he passed away, the mother said, "No, we're not
Huh?
going to do that. I don't want to do that."
Okay. What would you say? What's that?
I'm just asking if that's a separate, meaning if your father's commandment to you that he wants you to, eat vitamin C, is that different than him saying, "I want to be buried in Tiberias"?
Okay, so you tell me. You work it through. Tell me the answer. Yeah.
I think that the burying him is probably greater.
Well, you have a different
really
imperative there. The bury him in Israel is a separate possibility, right? It's a separate issue, right? We know that generally speaking, we want everybody to be buried in Israel, at least buried. If we're not living there, we want to be buried there.
So let's say he wants to be buried in Staten Island, and there's not so much room, and like.
He wants to be buried, and the remaining and
The mitzvah of Israel besides. So
okay, leave that out. Okay, he wants to be buried in Staten Island, and mom wants him to be buried in somewhere else.
yeah.
Okay, what do you want to hold? You're the rabbi. What do you say?
Probably.
Why does the mom wants to be married to something else? So they could be a family plot. So there could be something ultimately, huh?
Yeah, something to that extent.
Probably a real thing, right? It's Staten Island. It's full. They're going to, I think, New
Well, we-
Brunswick.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have cases now, right? Over a certain age,
Right,
you have to go to New Jersey,
right.
right? So I know a family now. The father was old enough for Staten Island, but they wanted him to be buried
What's his mother?
in New Brunswick with
Yeah,
possibly families, or so they did that.
they moved the body.
They didn't move his body. I'm saying as he died, the court they
They moved him over.
They decided. So, I mean,
They didn't put him in Staten Island.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's a very sensitive item. Somebody's burying wishes, right? I think this is a high.
Yeah.
I would think
Yeah.
you'd wanna
Yeah, you want to honor that.
honor that. Like,
so
that's
now,
his, like
so now the father wants something and the mother wants something else. That's your question, right? The father the new father who's dying says, "I want to bury her here," and he makes that point very clear. And the mother says, "No, we don't want to be separated. We all want to go to New Brunswick." Now, what do you want to do? Now, what do you want to
Since
do?
it has to do with him, I think we'll go with what his wish is.
Right, but what do you want to do in this case,
Because
Jeffrey?
that's
What do you want to do in this case? We just heard a case we just saw a case where the father asked to do something and the mother said something else, and we said go by the mother. And we said that even though the respect of the deceased is also biblical, but we still have a little edge. We have a biblical and a biblical, let's say, but the biblical in the context of the living person is more important.
yeah, but it's his body. That's why I'm saying
Okay.
we wouldn't give more weight because it's his body.
I don't know.
Let him decide. He can't decide from his own fate.
Okay,
where he
I don't
gets
know.
buried.
Yeah.
But
This is a case that happened in my family. My grandfather was in hospice and some would consider a delirious state. And he asked in his delirious state to be buried in Israel, contrary to everything that happened. And my father was the only person in the room. What do you do in that case? I don't,
And your grandmother was still alive and she didn't want to be buried in Israel?
correct.
So we were talking once with my kids, just that I was saying, I want to, I was going on this whole thing about I want to be buried in Israel. My wife's looking at me. It's not we want to be buried in Israel. She goes, what's the deal with this thing? I went on a whole thing with my kids. Make sure that after 120 years you take me to Israel. My wife's sitting there, She goes, what's the deal here? So anyway, I don't know. A delirious state, I don't know how to deal with that. I really don't know. That if the person, could we say that he had clarity of da'at? You're going to say that he didn't? That you added that angle, which makes it, if you didn't have cogent thought, it makes it very difficult.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's one of the clear conversations that...
That your father had with him.
Correct.
So what did you do in the end?
He was buried in the family plot.
Here.
He was buried here in the
Okay.
family plot.
Okay. I don't know the answer because you added the angle of that the person wasn't coherent.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say in that case. Let's do one more quick case. Chen Katav, להוכיח פשוט באין משה. Okay. Now hold on. I'm not going to go there. Hold
You
on
could
a
have a
second.
case where they're alive also.
What's that?
Law Leonard, you could have a case where someone is going to enter such a delirious state, and they said, I want care from person X, and let's say the wife disagrees now once you're there.
When the person is in hospice type of thing,
Yeah.
you're saying?
When they're alive, they're saying, I want to go to this hospital. But when it actually happens, it makes much more sense to go to the other hospital.
So then you would do what makes more sense. If in your rational objective you explored it, you this, that, then you're going to do that.
how about when both are alive? and your mother tells you something, your father tells you something else.
You have to listen to the father.
Oh,
Right. Okay. So just to be Mesakem, what we're holding is that the mitzvah of Kibbud Av V'em after death is also Midoraita, it's also biblical. And therefore, and how is it manifest? In terms of respecting a person's wishes, unless those wishes are contrary to the remaining family member who's alive, to mom, if dad passed, to
But not if
mom.
it's biblical.
Huh?
If it's
Even if
biblical,
it's
then we're going to listen to
the father.
to the father.
But we said as follows, that even though they're both biblical, we still have an added element, which is I listen to the living more so than the person who passed. That's the opinion that we saw, that was brought down, that I think appears to be the halachic position and would certainly be the logical position.
That's going to trump even that we listen to the father before the mother when they're both alive.
It appears that way. Yes, it appears that way. Very good, Jeffrey. Because still the kavod high is still a massive point. And therefore, if dad said something and mom says something else, even though they're both deoraita, they're both biblical, it appears from here that we would listen to the wishes of the one who's alive. Great. Okay. Okay. Baruch Adonai L'olam. Amen. Thank you.